Hello, friends. It's so wonderful to see people coming into this space. Thank you for coming tonight. This is just feels like a place of respite amidst all the chaos that is going on around us in so many different ways. And how beautiful that we can create community this way and be here and to discuss this beautiful work that Chelan has offered to the world. And I've got to say a special thank you to Zach, who is hiding behind his big love sign there, because it was and Zach, who is a dear friend and presenter with Alignment, when we were at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, he said, "Have you read Chelan Harkin's work?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And I ran straight out and got the first one I could get. And love at first sight. It was just that was Let Us Dance, and then Wild Grace came out, and Chelan came and visited us last year when that came out, and now what a treasure we have in the Prophetess. So it is a delight to welcome you back. And I will just say, everyone, we're recording this, but you will not be recorded. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to get to meet Chelan and speak to her in person at some point. Maybe Chelan, you'll open that up to people, but I will edit any of that out. And feel free to put things in the chat to engage with us that way as well. So thrilled that you all are here, and Chelan, a warm welcome from us to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Margaret, and thanks to everyone who showed up. How are you all doing? Doing well? It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you. I love what my life has become. I love showing up to groups like this. It's such a beautiful kind of surreal gift still to be invited to places to talk on these themes. And I find that it's just so cool. The deeper we surrender to what I like to call wild grace, the desires of and the currents of life that are very much at one with our truest desires, but also open magnificent doors. Just the more, I don't know, extraordinary, and it's both surreal and completely real at the same time. Anyway, it's an interesting mix, but it's a deep pleasure to be here. It's a real treat to, I mean, it's been that way very much with this book. Like I don't know, my past self of just 5 years ago wouldn't have been able to compute any of this. So it's just a real treasure to share a bit about really the meaning of this book. And so but anytime before I offer a talk, I like to drive around actually. It kind of puts me in a light trance. When we're driving, we're kind of in a trance state. And I say a prayer. I say, what would be most beneficial to talk about today? And then I just kind of wait. Like it's not a very strategic process for me. Um, and I open and I just wait and see what lands. And so today, what came is that what's most necessary and important and urgent, at least how it presented to me today, is to talk about how, as I see it and understand it, we can all participate in meaningfully, very valuably in the process of collective awakening. And that is something that I think, okay, we all feel the turmoil and the accelerated changes that are happening in our world. And in many cases, those changes are threatening to many people in power, who are then acting them out, arguably quite childishly, because because change, our identity being threatened, our knowns being threatened, our power, which is our way of maintaining that limited sense of I am being threatened it's scary. And so a lot of people in power are acting out that fear. And then a lot of us, understandably, can feel really like, I mean, honestly, I think one of the main questions is like, what the hell do I do that can be truly meaningful? We kind of can try this or try that. And I think many of us wish there was a more kind of organized, um, wise, grounded, organized front to connect with so we could channel our energies into something meaningful that would really be beneficial to the collective trajectory of humanity. And when we don't know where to plug in with that or how to channel our energies, we can understandably feel very frustrated or disempowered or hopeless or helpless or angry. And okay, so that's what I want to talk about, how we can, whether or not there's yet, an organized, constructive movement in the 3D that's happening to make that happen, what we can each do to really support collective awakening. So, and I care about that because an awakened humanity is far more functional than a than an unconscious humanity, and it's far more honestly enjoyable and beautiful, and our potential as individuals and as a collective can flourish when the social structures are such that they support in a healthy way that human emergence, the emergence of our truth and our flowering and our potential, which is what makes us happy and what I deeply experience and believe is what we're here for. And it's a very short life that we all have. And it is my strong feeling that this life is meant to be a thing of extraordinary satisfaction and joy. And so I've my whole life I've been quite disturbed because the circumstances aren't such that that joy can be easily cultivated and supported. But I know it in myself. I know the beauty and the light and the love that wants to come forth. And I see it in all of you, and you all know it. We all know it. We all sense it on some level in ourselves. And then, but it's barred from full expression because we're living in a societal space in which what is approved of is a well-constructed facade, rather than our authentic beauty and light. So, okay, so anyway, so I only have half an hour, right? So we're just gonna
No, this is an hour. Our Sunday ones are half an hour, but this
oh,
is
this is an hour? Oh, cool. So we'll have some time then too for some Q&A and oh, great. I'll slow down then. I was like,
a
let's
breathe.
okay. Woo. All right, cool. So, all right. So what do we do even if we're what if we're introverts? Like, how do we contribute to social change? What if we're going through a lot of personal struggles in our life? How do we contribute to deep, lasting, true change? Because that's another part of human thriving, as I see it. It's bringing our potential forth in a way that contributes meaningfully to the emergence of the whole. Because the truth is, we're not really individuals, and the wellness or the awakening, the evolution of the collective directly impacts our well-being and the individual's level of health and well-being and awakening directly impacts the collective. So we need to see it that way, that our own well-being is directly linked to how we are kind of pouring ourselves meaningfully into the whole. Otherwise, we get in sort of this echo chamber and then to a loop that doesn't ultimately bring forth the fullness of our potential. So the last 4 years or so have been a really intensive study in this in many ways, an experiment for me in how we impact what I would call, what many would call, this isn't my word for it, but the collective field of consciousness. So there's the plane, you could say, of just pure awakened consciousness where we all where everything's pretty much good and complete, the reality of who we really are, and deep connection to source and wisdom and security. That plane of existence is always associated with us, and we could say is the most fundamental and true plane of our existence. And then there's the other plane of reality that we contend with all the time in this human reality, and that is the evolutionary field of things, where we've inherited all kinds of things to work through. We've inherited shame. We've inherited, all kinds of trauma, which I would define as a contracted or a distorted, uh, the contracted or energetic distortions of reality that then is our job to resolve. And that's largely how we evolve. So we've inherited all this other stuff that needs to be worked through. And we hold that in our bodies and connected with these trapped energies inside of us. It could be, connected with these trapped energies inside of us is sort of a crystallized narrative about who we think we are. So if we've had experiences that have translated into a lot of shame or worthlessness, or maybe we've acted them out as anger, maybe we've been too passive in some situations, or maybe we've been aggressive in some situations, or too scared, or whatever. We have these narratives about ourselves. We have these limited I am statements about what we're capable of, about who we are, that are connected to these limited or false, ultimately, narratives connected to these trapped emotions that have come from our real experiences. And it's really my conclusion that all of the idiocy, all of the institutionalized idiocy in our world, really, it's an expression of that. It's an expression of this caged I am that doesn't know how to break out of, and it's in pain and it's acting out because it's meant to be resolved. So all of the, yeah, I mean, war, rape, plunder, violence, whatever you want to, whatever. Um, this old pain is it's inviting consciousness in for its liberation. And until it's liberated, it's acting out in arguably increasingly intense ways to really pull our attention into it. But the thing is, and this is extremely exciting. So these traumas, you could say these trapped energies inside of us, shame, insecurity, anger, hate, terror, whatever, whichever one you want to choose. They're personal in a way to some degree. We've all had personal experiences that have trapped up that life force in us, but these are collective human experiences. There's not anyone alive who doesn't know shame and all of these things that I mentioned. So it's almost like there's this field of distortion, you could say, energetic field that limits, it veils really it veils and limits and stunts the capacities of consciousness. And consciousness, when the more free it is, the more transformational its impact, the more creative it is, the more, honestly, just the more brilliant and organized, but in a fantastic way, like the forest is organized into this collective whole, each part of it supporting the prosperity and blossoming of everything. So as we ourselves are willing to commit to the path of what I like to call radical accountability, where rather than blame the people, even though it's ultra tempting, and sometimes we just do because we are dysregulated and we can't help ourselves, and I am very, I do that too. But to get back on track, that's what a commitment is. It doesn't mean we don't mess up. It means we do, and then we're willing to shine light on our straying and then get back onto the path of radical accountability, where And this doesn't, so if somebody does something to us that's unjust, that's unfair, that's harmful, radical accountability isn't permissive. It doesn't mean what they've done is okay. It doesn't do what it simply says is that's theirs to work out, and my reaction is mine to work out. And the more I work through that in myself, the more liberated I am, the more I liberate my consciousness. And the more I liberate this flow, this inspired flow of wild grace through me, and the more my life becomes magnificent. And I want that and I long for that. So whatever idiocy, no matter how justifiably bad it is, and people do really harmful things. And we really can't control that though, except that as we then commit to, okay, so they did something really painful to me that brought up deep betrayal, that brought up deep helplessness, that brought up deep worthlessness and insecurity. Then the work is bringing consciousness into contact with the deepest roots of whatever was brought up in us. And often the deep roots, if we are able to stay with this emotional intensity, so we bring consciousness into the body, which I feel is really what's meant by bringing heaven to earth, which is something that's said in many holy scriptures. It's this profound process of integration that happens inside of us. We're the temples of transformation. So we bring our awareness into connection with radical means of the roots, with the roots of whatever's coming up in us. And almost always, it's really tempting to think whatever this person is doing is causing my pain. Almost always, what's coming up in us is something, it's a reactivation of something that's been in us for quite some time. In my experience, every time I'm triggered by something or someone, there was a root in me that was already there that had been limiting my life, because anything that's held in us unresolved, again, it limits the capacities and the expression of the I am, of the self. So I just saw a comment. Oh, we'll get into that in a bit. But so so as we take responsibility for whatever comes up in us, it can be seen. And again, this isn't justifying the ways that we've been traumatized at all. There's nuance and subtlety in this. It's claiming the empowerment and agency to be our own liberators, though. And as we do, it's extraordinary. We're not our consciousness, it's just not as anchored to the past, to our limited narratives. And as we do that each and every time, it liberates the whole collective field, which makes the experience of consciousness for others more accessible and available. It makes the passage through the shadows in others a bit easier. It de-densifies kind of the field of kind of what you could call ignorance, the veils of ignorance, which are just, who we've thought ourselves to be, which then we all are complicit in when we agree and act out the kind of the narratives of the status quo. So there's a profound, and that's why the prophetess talks about how this book talks about how this process is accelerating our human awakening. And that's because the more that we do this, the more that we resolve the energetics of the old, the more motivation and capacity others have to do that. And the more it inspires, because you could say these trapped energies are like darkness or veils. And as we liberate them, it adds more light to the collective field. It's like more consciousness is available. And then the more resourced we are with light, the more brave and empowered we are then to be able to look at the shadow, because we know that's not who we were. And when we're in this dark room, when we're identified with the shadow, we don't have very much perspective, and we can think that's all that we are and all of that. So the more agents of transformation that do this work, just the more we flood the collective field with light, which is exactly, it's at a fundamental level, I feel that is what's needed for change. And then this is beautiful too, because in some spiritual spaces, there can be this false binary that's created between doing like this deep inner work and then social action. And the profound thing about being committed to this path is it's not that we then don't do anything in the world, we don't participate, but it's that we do it from a responsive place rather than a reactive place. A reactive place perpetuates the polarity of separation. It is the energetics of that group is bad. They are bad and we're good. And until we've resolved whatever is in us actually that's creating that polarity that's always in us if we're projecting that out, then we are with less maturity going to relate to our social action. When we relate to social action from a responsive place, we are we're so much more powerful because when we're coming from a polarity, it's not a powerful force of light. We're not accessing this force of light of the power of oneness, which is the power of life, because that's what life wants and longs for us to experience. And so life itself supports us as we move in the world from this place of responsive, constructive action rather than reactionary separation, which only continues to compound this separation, which honestly continues to create the harm that we're seeing, because then those people who are acting out feel dehumanized. Then their stuff around not belonging is unconsciously activated and they continue to be violent assholes or act that out. So are you guys, I just want to check in. How's all this going? Okay, great. Yeah, so there's a deep level of responsibility that we're all called for, and that is important. It's not by accident that to really to receive the power and the force of life, that first we need to be accountable for what's ours. Because until we, it's my experience that life, again, deeply longs for our most profound satisfaction and joy. And we cannot get there, really, for the most part, from other people changing their behaviors, unless and until it impacts us. We have to do the work of opening to the light that we are. And it's harrowing. It's harrowing, this process, because the passage, it's the most great dismantling ever yet. And I feel that this is what's happening on a collective level, is we are collectively dismantling the great and long-standing and false conditioned construct of who we've thought ourselves to be, which is the foundation of which is, these really sad, actually limiting narratives of I'm not worthy, I don't deserve love, I'm weak, I'm mortal, I'm really vulnerable, no one's ever loved me, I'll never be good enough. All of these old narrative, happy things can happen in our lives, but they bump into this again and again, so that we can't fully be saturated in the gift and the extraordinary generosity of life, and that the universe wants to pour into us. So this process of participating, this is so cool, in the collective journey of human awakening. It's first and foremost for our own profound satisfaction and joy. If awakening is just about morally doing it right and people finally complying with the rules that we think they need to follow, like that's not gonna, if we are coming from that place, which is a place of control, which is a place of fear because we're feeling separate because of all of this stuff, we're just not going to really get there. So it's been so extraordinary and transformational for me to experience again and again and again consistently how my world and my perspective and the circumstances change and become more harmonious and more aligned, and how people in my surroundings who maybe I've had really obnoxious and long-standing dynamics with, how things start to soften and shift as we do this energetic work of deeply resolving what is ours. And that is the way, actually, and we can't really do it for this reason. If we're motivated by doing it so they'll change, that just means there's some other thing in us that we need to go into and be with and look at and resolve, you know? But that is one of the most beautiful ways, that's the way that we can truly help people, and even people that we don't know, that we can help people transform by bringing light to the situation. And then they see for themselves. That is an inbuilt capacity in humans, is to be able to self-reflect. And it's another inbuilt capacity in people to actually to have what I call an authentic morality, because we are tuned, we're wired to be aligned with the principles of life. And the principles of life are that we grow closer and closer to alignment with the joyful, authentic truth of that we're all intimately interconnected. And that then as we get closer to that, we become motivated again to express our life force in a way that benefits both ourselves, because we're part of the whole, and that benefits everyone, not from this should place, which is usually coming from, if I act this out and I'm good enough, then finally those people will like me enough and I'll feel secure. My phone's ringing, sorry. So it's still coming from an acquisition, which is still coming from an I'm not enough place. So what we want is to express authentically to the world in a way, from a place of that rises, that's motivated by and rises from the deep experience, knowing that we are an integral part of the desires of the universe and the life force of the universe and the beauty of the universe. So anyway, so we're all wired for that. And so as more light comes into the situation, when we're super off track with that, that's when we start to see that, like, oh my God, and become horrified with the levels that we've been acting out, extreme ignorance of that, and desecrating our bodies, the people in our world, and just really misusing our life force, and it becomes irresistible. And over time, for people even who are entrenched in the deepest ignorance, it becomes they become unable to avoid anymore, because then the contrast grows so strong as more light is rising. The more intense the strategy to avoid the truth has to be in place. The more intense the addictive patterns and the self-avoidance and the denial, which this is such a glorious truth of life, that compounds our own suffering. The more we're acting out of alignment from this truth of our oneness, and then it simply gets to a point. This is part of why we evolve, because we get to a point where acting out the limited version of I am becomes too painful, because it's not aligned with what we're meant to become. And that is right there. That's what gives me hope more than anything else, is really understanding the mechanics of suffering, that our suffering is directly correlated to how out of line and understanding our thought patterns, our habit patterns, our behaviors, our relational understandings are from love and truth and humility and reality. And we're most motivated, is the truth. We're not most motivated to be good people. That's a nice outcome. We're most motivated to feel great, to feel free from suffering, and to be extraordinarily happy. But the excellent news is that the only path to true extraordinary happiness, to letting go of suffering and to feeling great, is to align closer and closer and closer with the truth of our oneness through letting go of these traumas that have distorted our perception and our perspective and have hijacked our our behaviors and have gotten us off track. Let's pause and let's I want to open the space for any questions or comments or curiosities or excitements or anything that anyone feels to share at this point.
Would you say you particularly like the name of our organization?
Oh, I
Align.
love it. I love it. I love it. I think it's one of the most beautiful words that there is. And I'm a word nerd to the max. And that principle of alignment, it's, well, when I believe it's the ions in metal. I might not be there, check this, but there's something in for metal to become magnetized, all of its ions or something like that need to be in alignment with the same point. And then this hunk of otherwise useless metal becomes it gets a completely new force associated with it. And it can fly across the room and it has this attractive dynamic power. And that is how I've experienced alignment in people to be too, that it's like we harness the extraordinary and transformational powers of the universe when we are in alignment with when we are in alignment, which is our joys, I would say, which is our joys, our desires, deep desires that life has planted within us. When we bring those forth in service of our fullness and potential and in the service of others.
So,
That's one definition of alignment.
yeah, so in alignment, what we basically, this organization is kind of based in is that we look for that alignment with whatever it is we understand to be that of the divine that is within us and exists beside us with the relationships that we form with everyone that is here, with everyone in our lives, and in alignment with earth and the great mysteries of creation. And so being in alignment with the divine that is within, beside, and beyond is is how we kind of base everything that we do here and the people that we ask to come and share with us. So we're so grateful that you are here sharing this with us. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about personally how this came to be for you, how the prophetess came into your life?
Yeah, sure thing. Specifically the prophetess. Would you like to hear about that journey? Absolutely. Absolutely. So and it's that completely has to do with this theme of alignment. So I'll make this brief, but I came into the world really, really aware, like that we're light, that our truest self are these frequencies of light, really, that we're here to, and that we're here to deeply live in this authentic, luminous, connected joy together. And then pretty early on, I think I was 6. And there was this moment almost, it was crushing. It was like, oh my God, not everyone's living like that. And along with that was like, oh my God, and I'm going to be made fun of if I'm really open-hearted, if I really tell people how much I love them, if I'm really, you know, enthusiastic about who I, oh, just one second. Hi, sweetheart. Oh my gosh, my kids are home early. I'm gonna go. Is Grandma Rainey here? Okay, tell her I'm still doing my talk and I'm not done yet, and you guys can go get some food. Okay, I love you. Sorry, guys. That's my 7-year-old son. My grandma's supposed to, or my mom's supposed to be with him. Anyway, wow. So, so I then um felt a lot of ridicule and hurt and deep wounds in having an open heart. And it was so unbearably sad for me that I then took it upon myself really to spend the next like 15, 20 years or so of my life just burying my light alive. And which that for me it was very, very, very painful, but it felt less painful than exposing it to not belonging, and to the kind of harm that I had experienced in that journey. So then, anyway, so long story short, I needed to go through a profound process at one point where I had to come to terms with, okay, burying my truth and my light and living in a way that is more based on self-protection than self-emergence. That doesn't work for me anymore. And that suffering grew to a point where that um, whole set of ideologies had to be toppled. And that's really where poetry started to come through me, was when I started to surrender the benefits, because all of this trauma, if we hold it, it does have some benefit in a way. So I felt safe and hidden and, protected from ridicule. So as soon as I started to let that go, one of the rewards, and we always get these rewards as we let go of that, was that poetry started to move through me. So, anyhow, so at the end of 2020, I decided to publish a book, and that was a huge leap. That was a huge leap. And I really realized, like, wow, so many limiting assumptions guard our deep desires. Our precious gifts are so um, protected by all of these fears of what will happen if we are seen in our the fullness of our light. And honestly, it's the most extraordinary journey of my life, but it was the most brutal because I needed to confront all of these very painful narratives that I'd held for so long. Um, but it and then realizing this was the most extraordinary thing, realizing that those limiting assumptions that I had been the victim of, you could say, or I had allowed to rule my life, to realize those weren't at all true. Um, that my fears were all about how people would respond to my work. And it's been completely different, to say the very least. Anyway, so part of my process in publishing this book, I share this story often. It's pretty cool. I just had this kind of powerful, unshakable impulse to do a prayer experiment, of asking my favorite dead poets for marketing support, specifically with my book, because I didn't have any connections in the publishing world. And one of them was Kahlil Gibran, who's the author of The Prophet, who this book is inspired by, considered some of the most profound spiritual poetic philosophy ever written, the Kahlil's book. And anyway, so I was praying to this dead poet and some others, and almost as soon as that process began, extraordinary doors started opening for me, and a poem came through and went wildly viral, and I got all this amazing international audience overnight. And then a famous poet reached out to me and said he wanted to help me, basically, and wanted to co-author a book with me, and he endorsed me to all the major publishing houses of the world. And then about a year or so, a little more after that, that was so amazing that I just really amped up my prayer experiment to these dead poets, which again was another affirmation of just we are connected. Our wishes that are aligned with truth and love and desire and emergence are connected not only to the forces and factors in this plane, but in the plane beyond. And yeah. And so, anyway, so I kept up this prayer experiment, often asking Kahlil Gibran specifically for aid and assistance and guidance and inspiration. And then there was this very ordinary moment. I think I just put my kids to bed or something and was just slammed with this. It was almost like a lightning bolt that just said, it's time to write the prophetess and you're the one to do it. Let's go. And inspired verse just started pouring. And this whole book kind of poured through me in about 2 months. It was pretty much complete, just needed to be reorganized. So it's just been such a blessing of wild grace. And and then it was bought by a big publishing house, and then that publishing house was bought by Penguin Random House right before this was released. And I signed the contract 100 years to the date of the publishing of The Prophet, which was wild. And then I committed while I was writing this book. I actually, the book The Prophet had deeply, profoundly inspired me, but I hadn't read it in years. And I didn't read any of it while I was writing this book because I didn't want to get into any mode of comparison. And I wanted this book to be its own tone, deeply an homage and inspired by that book, but not, I don't know. Just didn't want to read it until I was done. And then when the book was complete, I read it again and realized that the whole last chapter of the original is about the return of the inspiration that moved through him. And the last line in his book is, a little while, a moment of rest upon the wind, and another woman shall bear me, which is just wild. And then that original poet, Daniel Ladinsky, who has done so much for me, it turns out he had written the extended edition, the foreword to the extended edition of The Prophet. And he also wrote the foreword to this book too. And then just a fun cherry on top, because I feel like when we're operating from wild grace, the universe just puts all the cherries on top and extra sprinkles and whipped cream, and it just gives these fun touches to let you know that, like, to honestly to teach us, I think, about the principle of prosperity and loving generosity that is available to us in the storehouse of the universe. So this Saturday I'm flying to Hawaii because I've become close kindred family friends, like that feeling, with Kahlil Gibran's great nephew, who, yeah, through wild, I wasn't looking for him. He wasn't looking for me. We didn't know. And anyway, he's had some wild mystical experiences with Kahlil Gibran as well that have transformed his life. And I'm flying to visit him. And we're talking about creating the Gibran Center in Hawaii on land that he has as a retreat center. So that's happening. And all these pieces are just coming into place. And it is so wild. And, I'm just so delighted. This thing in particular, like, as wild as this story has been, it's also shown me how indoctrinated I am with Western thinking, because all these extraordinary things are happening, and still part of my mind is like, well, that might be a coincidence, or that, maybe it was. And then this thing, though, it's just, oh, it's like, okay, I freaking surrender, universe. You got me. So anyway, that's the
That,
story.
that is wild. And here's another little connector for you too.
Oh, bring it on.
We
Yeah.
have an author every month come and
Okay.
grace us with their presence and their gifts. And I was just talking this week with the woman who is going to come and be our presenter in May. She is of the Baha'i tradition, and she is entitling her talk Connections and Coincidences.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, and I grew up in the Baha'i faith.
I
Did you
know.
know that? Oh
Yeah,
yeah, you did. Okay. And then Kahlil Gibran,
yeah,
wildly,
yeah.
he wasn't a Baha'i, but he was a anyway. I don't know anyway, but he was really deeply inspired by by the
Was
Baha'i writings, which is just another unusual
yes.
coinky there. But anyway, so all of this, it's really it's been an outstanding joy to be participating in these wild experiences. But it's not because I mean, and I want to honor myself that I have done things and I've taken risks and I've been brave and I've been true to this journey. And what I've done, it's not because I'm special in a way that's apart from anyone else. It's because for whatever reason, these series of experiments and a deep need for alignment, because I'm so goddamn sensitive to being off from my track. When I am, it hurts me emotionally too much. So I've needed to give a tremendous amount of attention in my life to alignment and but that this type of thing, it's really available to everyone. And I strongly suspect, in fact, I'd be extraordinarily surprised if stories like this don't more and more become the norm and the basis for what moves us and for how we live. And the more we do it, and the more we're connected with other people doing it, because I mean, it's been cool living this journey, but when we're then connected with networks of people who are living this way and the synergy and the synchronicities, it's just going to become so extraordinary. It's going to look a lot like that beautiful rainbow that's behind Steve there in his picture. Just bright and vivid and glorious and extraordinary. And it's honestly, this journey too is of receiving the universe's great generosity. It's extraordinarily humbling. And often, like things like manifestation are painted in kind of a snooty, like there's can be a little bit of an arrogant tone laced in there. But really, when we're truly on this path, like it challenges us more than anything else, I think, to um it can really bring us to our knees because to receive love and amazing blessings from the universe, we have to receive is to know that we're worthy of receiving, and to know that we're worthy of receiving, usually we have to pass through, which means to really connect with, have extraordinary compassion for, and understand all of the dynamics of the ways we've believed ourselves to be unworthy. And then we go through that humbling passage and we feel ever so slightly more worthy. And then beautifully, the more passages of this sort that we go through too, then we project all that we've gained onto the whole world, all the beauty that we've recovered in ourselves, and all the compassion for the gnarly struggles, and for the ways the gnarly struggles act out in all kinds of immature ways. Um, so anyway, it's been an extraordinary journey. I'm a completely the way I express myself in the world, it's completely different. And I mean, not completely, but it's like I've just been truly busted open
Mm.
in the last few years. Um, and I'm excited and I love being asked to speak because I really I I want to encourage people onto this path. And I also feel like that there could be a way of creating profound transformation that can happen relatively rapidly and in this kind of with this extraordinary grace. A lot of me does feel like that's the only way for humanity to get out of the wreckage that we've put ourselves in, because we are enmeshed in some gnarly structures and systems internally and externally. And so but it's greatly energizing and enlivening and hopeful for me to see that there's a whole other um, set of laws and principles that can help us navigate this and really create this extraordinary change that comes from bringing more light to ourself and to the world. Um, and that operates in ways that is so much better, so much infinitely better than anything that our small will, no matter how intelligent or clever it is, could ever try to solve or act out.
Yeah.
I did. That's a good question. And I want to just honor your dismantling. And oh my God, I'm with you, sister. Yep. And so I did want to be a full-time poet. I wanted, honestly, I wanted my book, which took me 12 years to publish because I was so afraid to get up the courage to publish. I really wanted it to have my dream of dreams was for it to have enough success so that I could really, I guess, justify really giving all of my time to this kind of thing. And I was at that time, I was a mom. I have two kids, a seven, now they're 7 and 4. At the time, they were like 4 months old and 3 years old. And so I knew, I needed to have an income. And but yeah, how this has gone has been beyond belief. Um, yeah, so I did want that, and it was very clear, like this is for my truth and my joy and my liberation, and for that of all. It wasn't like it was motivated by money or making money or getting at all, but I did want there to be structure that could support just the continuation of what I'd really discovered, like, oh my God, this is what I seriously want to do with my life. And then that's vulnerable because then we think, oh crap, I've recognized this. It's alive in me. But there's a real possibility it might not work now to do. Um, so it's just been an unbelievably huge delight that I've gotten to shift into doing this pretty much full time. Well, I think it's true. When we're seen, we attract all kinds of things. And so I do spend a lot of I do spend a lot of time. Like people ask me about my writing process if I have a disciplined thing where I sit down at the desk or whatever. And I that's not my style, but what I do spend a tremendous amount of time resolving um energies that either are mine, or that originate in me or that I've taken on for some reason. And so it's not easy, I would say. It's not easy at all. But I do find that the deeper I go on this journey, I would say, and I would say this is true for many, and the more rooted and confident and stable and secure and centered we are in that light, the more there's I feel in some ways more of a natural. I wouldn't even call it a shield, more just the frequency of that is kind of just with me rather than being more susceptible or thrown around or impacted as much by other people's. And you also become more sensitive. So you just kind of don't go around folks as much who are, giving off that kind of, and I don't mean positive vibes only crap. I don't mean that. But, people who really aren't yet clear about some of their maybe harmful motivations still and are kind of, enmeshed in those, and it feels bad to be around them. Um, you just become more attuned, and the inner guidance within and the intuitive inner guidance becomes clearer. So I feel there's a natural way of moving that clarifies, if that makes sense. But good question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I know we're at the top of the hour. Thanks so much, Chelan, for this wonderful time and all your wisdom. A lot of what you were speaking about strikes me as very applicable to people who are seeking healing through therapy, as well as through their spiritual communities and doing their own kind of self-healing work, which I fully believe in all of those forms of healing. Um, so I guess this is more of a comment than a question, but I feel like what you're talking about is could have profound impacts on people who are trying to bridge the worlds of spiritual exploration and psychotherapy or other forms of therapy that might help them to cope with some of the systemic and generational experiences that have impacted them. So thank you for
Mm.
that.
Oh, thank you. You've worded that so beautifully. Thank you for that. That I'm gonna keep that with me, what you just said. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of like holding and guiding in a way the whole healing, psychological, emotional, relational, historical healing process from a place of, from a perspective of the full potential of the impact of that and what we can emerge into as we go through that. Yeah.
For
I
the
wish we could stay together
I know, I
longer.
just wanted to say for those who were in our Sunday session of prayer in a time of war, um, you may recall, those of you who were there, that I posted my favorite chapter from the Prophetess. And I was wondering if I could just read the very last paragraph of it, because I think it sums up what you have said so beautifully and why we are all here in this space right now. So to quote Chelan, and the chapter is called "The Time of the End." There is an invisible movement happening, of which you are all a part. It is time to participate more fully. We are all co-creators in the awakening of human consciousness. The latent period of human dormancy is over. It is time to bring all of ourselves to light. This is the era of inclusion. Nothing in ourselves can anymore be cast out, rejected. The new world is the world of complete embrace. This is the age of wholeness.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. So deeply honored to have you join Alignment and to teach us more about alignment. You're a treasure, and we're so grateful for you being here and for all of you for joining us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you all. Deeply, deep honor and blessings to all. Thank you. Lots of love.
Love, love, love.